Good morning, everybody. We can, thank you. I think it's approaching 10:30. My apologies for being slightly late. I was talking to Councillor Dilkson about the miners' strike of 1985. If one want to go live and then start the meeting, thank you. Right, good morning, everybody, and first of all, very happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Constitution Committee of South Coast District Council. It's 10:30 a.m. Monday, the 10th of January 2022. Before we start, any apologies for absence, Lucy?
None, Chairman. Everybody's present.
Thank you very much. Have we got any disclosures of members' interests? Can't see any. Okay. So move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2021. Or before I go on, I should say that in terms of fire, there is no fire drill planned for this morning. So if the fire alarm does ring, then we do obviously need to exit the building by the marked fire exit at the front of the at the back of the council chamber. Thank you. So, agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I'm assuming all members have had the opportunity to read them, but we'll just go through them in page order. So, start with page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Can you point me to the reference to the comment that was made by the Vice Chair about the consequences for people who don't sign up for the new? It may be in there and I've missed it, but I do remember that Councillor Wootton asked a question about if people haven't signed up to the new code of conduct, what kind of weight it would have.
Yes, thanks to Councillor Baxter. I believe that's covered. That's the top of page 7, the first paragraph there. Now, I was going to, because the action there was the head of Democratic Services indicated he would take advice on the issue outside of the meeting. So I don't know if there is any feedback on that or not. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Graham, I'm looking at the wrong person. Sorry, Graham.
Mike, thank you, Chairman. Yes, so as part of Councillor Wootton's reference to the new code of conduct at full council, there was an explanation there in relation to there isn't an expectation or requirement for councillors to sign up to the new code of conduct by signing their declaration of acceptance of office. That covers us in terms of members signing up to that and other protocols such as the Constitution in terms of being a councillor. So there's no additional requirement to sign the new member code of conduct.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Baxter? Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, sorry, I did have that highlighted. So I'm thank you, Councillor Baxter, for raising that. Move on now to agenda item 4, if we can, which is to consider the action sheet. And I think all of these items have actually been covered because we did discuss the new members' code of conduct at full council at the end of November. The item there 2 is on today's agenda, and oh, sorry. Sorry, yes, I forgot. Thank you. Thank my Vice Chairman. We do need to take a vote on the minutes. Do I have a proposer for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Wootton. Do I have a seconder for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor David Bellamy. Thank you. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Any against and any abstentions? Thank you very much, Councillor Sandal. My apologies. It's a new year. I'm just just getting back into things. And as part of my introduction, I should have welcomed Councillor Phil Dilks to the meeting. I know he's not a member of this committee, but I see that he's here. And I certainly exercise my chairman's prerogative and allow non-members of the committee to ask questions. So, okay, thank you. So I think going back, look at the action sheet, I think all of those actions have either been dealt with or are happening. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of the tape, would it be possible to reiterate or repeat the number of Lincolnshire authorities that had adopted the new model code of conduct?
Graham, were you able to confirm that? Thank you.
I did send an email, Chairman. I know a number of authorities are looking at the new model code in this year, 2022. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the number of authorities that have adopted it as a model code. I know that the County Council has adopted a code of conduct that's in line with the model code, but I think they felt that aspects of their existing code met the principles of the model code. I don't have the exact number of authorities, but I will confirm in due course.
Will I find it in the minutes of the full council?
I think there was some reference to that, but I'm not. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, apologies for this. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I can't second it, can I?
No, you Councillor Griffin got there slightly first. Thank you very much. So can we change Councillor David Bellamy's to an abstention on the minutes? Thank you much indeed. Thank you. Yes, back up to Graham.
Yes, Councillor, I think it was in the report to Council in relation to the new model code of conduct, so it should be in there. So apologies, I don't have that information to hand, but it should be there.
Okay, thanks very much. So now moving over to agenda item 5, which is the substantive part of today's meeting. And I've had a pre-chat, and the 3 recommendations are all sort of quite different. The first one refers us to the engagement activity that's happened so far in terms of drawing up the responsibility for functions section of the new constitution. Recommendation 2 talks about recommending the new Part 3 responsibility for functions document to go to the next full council at the end of January. And the third recommendation talks about agreeing the process for the next stage of the review. Because they're different in their sort of terms, what I'm proposing to do is to take each recommendation separately. So to ask Graham, first of all, just to run through the engagement activity that's happened so far, which is really contained within section 2 of our report today between pages 12 and 15, and then invite comments from members. And then move on and ask Graham to then run through recommendation 2, the document that we're proposing to go to full council. And then again, ask for questions and input from members of the committee. And then finally, to look at agree the process for the next stage, and again, to open that up again for members' questions and comments. So I hope that meets the approval of members of the committee. I just think it would be helpful just to break it down in that way. So I'll ask Graham then to sort of run through the recommendation 1 first of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, thank you first of all for everyone that's taken part in the engagement sessions in relation to this piece of work. We've had really good feedback and really good engagement from officers and members as part of the process. The full list of those that we've consulted with is set out at paragraph 2.3 of the report. So a lot of individual meetings with members and with key officers to get to to help us with the development of the new Part 3 document, which is the new scheme of delegation. And in addition, we had really good engagement at the member workshops where I gave an explanation as to the different documents that I've been working on, and that gave members an opportunity to provide comments and feedback in relation to the new Part 3 document itself. Under 2.5, there are a number of things that came out of those sessions, and Chairman, if I could just go through those, if that's okay. So the first one was that there were positive comments regarding the process that's been undertaken and the presentation of the documents, which should make it easy for council or councillors at full council to navigate their way through the changes that have been made, showing that it's an open and transparent process and that we haven't missed anything. And I think that's well, hopefully the committee will agree that that's a format that we can use going forward for the rest of the review. Questions were raised as to the inclusion of provision under the officer delegations of ensuring that ward members are informed of decisions made by officers in exercising delegated powers. And I think that was along the lines of some significant decisions that officers are taking in relation to licensing enforcement, for example, in members' wards. I think the difficulty of including something in the scheme of delegation that kind of means that any decision taken by an officer means that they have to inform ward members is that there are a lot of decisions in here that are day-to-day operational decisions that officers will be taking. So that would generate a lot of email traffic to you as local members. I think the key principle, though, from an officer's perspective, is that they should be keeping members up to date with significant decisions they're taking anyway that affect their ward. So that's something that we will take back through CMT and through senior management team in terms of ensuring that local members are informed of key things that happen in their areas. Questions were raised in relation to the delegation of powers to police community support officers regarding the enforcement of littering, waste and dog fouling and issuing penalty notices, fixed penalty notices, sorry. That confirmation was just sought as to whether that is actually an existing delegation that's used. I was under the impression that it actually provided flexibility, and I've had that confirmed that we don't currently have that authorised, but it is in the scheme should we need to use PCSOs to undertake that enforcement for us. There were a number of amendments to formatting and page numbering and cross-referencing and things. That's all been taken into account. There are some specific examples given at the workshop sessions, which I've amended in the document. The page numbering is something that we will ensure is taken into account for the whole document once it's recommended to council at the AGM. And one of the things that we'll be looking to do is making it so that we can amend pages and replace them without having to reprint the whole document to make that a lot easier for document control. So that's something that will evolve as the review progresses. There were some suggested amendments to the executive function section to amalgamate two areas of delegation into one. So I've formatted some of the tables in there, and one of our members actually pointed out that the wrong delegation was in the wrong column. So thank you, Councillor Baxter, for that. So that's all been amended, and that's one of the key parts of this process is to get as many people looking at this as possible to make sure it's right. And again, similarly, in the executive function section, there was just some emphasis that needed to be undertaken in relation to individual cabinet members. The wording wasn't as clear as it possibly could have been, so that's been tweaked to make that clearer. Also, in relation to executive functions, just to emphasise the difference between revenue and capital funding, so we've put those in bold to make it absolutely clear that they are two different elements, and they are cross-referenced to the financial procedure rules. There's a question raised about removal of enforcement action relating to the failure to put a dog on a lead. I've got a response here that gives an explanation as to why that's been removed. The failure to put a dog on a lead when requested are all part of the current public spaces protection orders. While we do have several that relate to animals, PSPOs can cover wider issues. Enforcement of public spaces protection orders come under the neighbourhoods team. So that's covered in section 12 of the Part 3 document. So that's covered there. Questions were also raised regarding the use of simple cautions and the status of such cautions. So I think it was the terminology of a simple caution and what that represented. So a simple caution, once known as a formal or police caution, is a formal warning that may be given by the enforcing authority, such as police or local authorities, to persons aged 18 or over who admit to committing an offence The simple caution scheme is designed to provide a means of dealing with low-level, mainly first-time offending without a prosecution. So that's just an example, an explanation as to what that simple caution refers to.
Yes,
Sorry, to be specific on that, my question at the workshop, for which I'm very grateful for the workshops, if I forget to mention it later on, my question was, if I get a caution from an officer of the council, is that the same as a caution from a member of the police force? Will it show up on records, criminal records? Is it the same status? If not, what's the difference?
Just to answer that, I'm just reading further along my advice that I was provided with. Simple cautions form part of an offender's criminal record and may be referred to in future legal proceedings. So it is the same. Yeah.
Councillor
Yes,
Rayward.
thank you, Chairman. Graham, could I just ask you in what context was the surveillance and investigation section on the Officer's Delegation? Was that under the Regulatory Powers Act, Investigatory Powers Act? At the end, where it says in respect to surveillance?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Yeah. We've still got just one officer to do with that. Sorry.
Yeah, so that is still in the documents at the it's one of the final sections of the new part. So that is included in there. It's section 31, surveillance and investigation. Currently, it's the chief executive or any officer that she authorises in writing as being appropriately trained or qualified. Page 47. So, Chairman, other than that, I'm very grateful again for the time that members took to engage with this process, and the feedback that we received has been really helpful in getting us to a document now that I think is, well, subject to approval today, ready for submission to council. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone that participated in those sessions.
Thank you very much indeed, Graham. I'm going to put this up now to members of the committee for, obviously this recommendation is only for us to actually note it, but obviously any comments that we've got can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Anybody wants to come back on that? Councillor Susan Sandal.
Could I ask a question about not just what the part of the Constitution, but not what has been amended, another area that I have a query on? Is that okay?
Absolutely, that's fine, yes.
Okay, on page 8 of the Constitution, political balance, it shows at July the 19th, after the election, how many officers there were for each party. And I assume that will then stay there for the next 4 years. But when you go to page 65 and you have the cabinet membership, the cabinet's listed, but the officers who are holding those posts are listed. And that is potentially a current one, but it doesn't say at a specific date. I think we should be uniformative in either. I mean, you can't keep changing it every time an officer moves. Either it has to both be at the beginning and then updated every 4 years, or, you know, because to me, that is nothing like it was at the beginning of the election, was it? That is of today, and I don't believe that's relevant even now. So I have an issue with the fact it's perhaps officers' names shouldn't be put in against them. It should just be the positions or something, or it should be shown at the beginning of the election period.
I mean, I would support the sentiment behind what Councillor Sandal says. In that, I think were you looking at Article 8 on page 65 or somewhere else? Yeah, so we've got the name of the leader. It would make sense to me not to put any names in because people come and go. But also the scheme of delegation changes quite often. So I would be minded just to kind of explain within the Constitution what a scheme of delegation is and how it is delegated, and then put the details of what falls within which portfolio as some kind of appendix, which doesn't need the Constitution Committee, Act of Parliament, whatever, in order to change it. However, that's not, there are many other things with the Constitution which one might want to change. The agenda item today is purely about the delegation of functions bit, which I don't think is relevant to, not to say it's not relevant, I mean, it's related to, but that's not the bit we're fiddling about with today, if that's not too crude.
I understand. Councillor Sandal, yeah.
I thought we would be in voting on this, or we were presenting it to the council en bloc, this part of the section. We're not doing, or are we just putting the small parts to them? Because if we're putting this as section 3, is it section 3? We are voting for something which isn't accurate, is it? Those positions aren't accurate at the moment, as I understand. So what I'm saying to you is, are we asking them to vote for just the alterations or for the section en bloc?
Sorry, that's great. Give us some clarification around that. Thank you.
So the section you've referred to is actually outside the part, as Councillor Baxter said, outside the part of the Constitution we're reviewing at the moment. So the bit that Council's being asked to vote upon doesn't make reference to the parts that you've highlighted. The new document that Councillor Dean asked to vote upon is Appendix A, which is part 3. So that doesn't have any yet. And when we come to that part of the review, that's exactly what I'll be recommending that we do, is to take individual names out and append the scheme of delegation that the leader approves as part of the Constitution. And one of the other things that's very dangerous is to actually set out the political balance of the authority, because that can again change quite frequently. So that's probably something again that I would be recommending to not include in the Constitution.
Okay, thanks on that one, Graham. I just want to ask people to move on if both councillors Sandal and Baxter are okay with that. And I think it's important that obviously if that's noted, Graham, and then when we move on to that stage of the Constitution, we can pick this item up again. Councillor Reader Griffin, thank you.
Thank you. Going back to moving things in or out of the Constitution, or thinking you have to write the whole thing, years and years ago when I first started, we had a booklet, we had a file, and it was made it much easier. So if you did need to change things, you undid your clip, out it went, put your new bit in. So I think rather than having to go to the expense of doing all that, I think that would be an easier version. Looking at all through this and seeing the people who are involved, there's one person that is actually obliterated, and that's the chairman of the council. There is no mention as to where they come in to help or to be consulted. And I would have thought if you're running a meeting, you need to know what's going on and to probably be part of this section. But and they should know what's going on, because obviously they're working towards what they're doing with this piece of information. So I think it would be a good idea if the chairman of the council was included in amongst the people that are involved.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. I think you made 2 excellent points there. I know that the first point around the potential hard copy of this, I know the councillor Ian Selvage raised a similar issue as well, and I know we've spoken, myself and Graham have spoken about that, but I don't know if you, Graham, want to answer those 2 specific points. Thank you.
I think that the key part of the Constitution that we absolutely will need your the chairman's input on is in relation to rules of procedure, especially council procedure rules. So this is about delegated decision taking as opposed to how the council meeting works. So I would absolutely ensure that the chairman of the council is involved in the rules of procedure in relation to how the council works. That's the next stage of the review, effectively. But apologies for not engaging directly on this aspect of that.
Julie?
It's just that I think really it should have been right from the word go, so you can see the progression and how it's working and what's going on. You then going back going through some of the exercises again and see what's happening. I think it is important to be, even if you're not making a contribution and saying something, at least if you're there, you're aware of what's happening and how it's happening and whatever. So I think probably it should be from the start and get everybody involved who needs to be. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Griffin. I think we've noted that. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you. So comments on the whole thing. I'm really grateful really pleased with the progress that's been made. Really grateful for the opportunity to have a dialogue beforehand. I actually, due to my lateness at the workshop, I kind of got a special session with the chair and the head of democratic services, for which I was grateful, and really pleased to have been able to ask lots of questions and get a better understanding. So the way the process is going, from my point of view, is healthy and welcome, and means we don't have to spend 3 hours today kind of going into the commas and dots and what have you. I also welcome the incremental approach. As Councillor Sandals pointed out, there's lots of things within the Constitution that we might wish to change. Other things that spring to mind would be the length of speeches at council. We might want to change that to make it 10 minutes rather than 5 minutes, or perhaps 3 minutes rather than 5 minutes. But we don't, that's not what we're doing today. We can do that later on when the whole thing is tidier. And this incremental approach, I think, is a tidying up, and I'd be grateful if when I've done that, somebody could confirm that we are only tidying up what's already in it and abiding by the law. Where the law has changed or the legislation has changed, that we're just making that easier. And during the workshop, we were given a list of all the different acts of parliament that relate to local authorities, and I don't know if it was an exhaustive list, but it certainly was an exhausting list, and I'm pleased that that's been tidied up so that we don't have to change our constitution every time a minister changes a right or a power. So that's really good. I'd certainly welcome Councillor Griffin's request to go back to a lever arch file, so that instead of throwing the whole thing out, we can just take out page number, and as long as those pages are in the what do you call it, the footer, as long as we say what was the date of upgrade, we can tell who's got the most up-to-date version. That's an obvious thing to do, so that we're all working from the same document. And this whole thing is about making it easier to understand, so that we don't have arguments with the chair or with the monitoring officer at full council about what the rules are and whether or not we look at rule 4.5 rather than rule 5.4. If it's all clear and consistent, that's going to be so much better, and the progress is really welcome. And it is, I think it will make life easier when we're trying to identify who is responsible for what. This should mean that we know who we're supposed to go to, and save a few steps in the chain when we're emailing the wrong person. Finally, I would pick up on the comment that Mr. Watts said about paragraph 2.5, when we talked about the question of delegations to ward members. This is not, those questions are not relevant to the restructuring of the Constitution. However, since you've raised them, I would say that, yeah, there's a tension. As a ward member, I want to know, and I make it my business to know what's going on in my ward. So I don't want to know every time a street sweeper comes down and every time there's a branch that's removed or a bin is missed or whatever. I don't need that level of detail. But at the other end, I find it quite frustrating and embarrassing when things happen within the ward that the council is heavily involved in that I know nothing about. For example, when void properties are void for years at a time for legal reasons, and all the neighbours know about it, but I don't. Even when I've asked specific questions about that particular property, I'm still not told what the real reasons are. And we're all old enough and educated through the training programme enough to know what's confidential and what's not, especially if we're told this is confidential. And so there are many times that I've been frustrated when the first time I've known something is happening in my ward is when I've seen a photograph of a portfolio holder in the Stamford Mercury or in SK Today doing something. I'm not sure if I've actually seen my ward in SK Today, but you get my point. When decisions are made about wards, we should at least have the courtesy to inform the ward members, even if they're not invited to the photo opportunity or the decision-making forum. So sorry to moan about that, because up until then I was quite positive, and I am really positive about this and happy to be part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you much indeed, Councillor Baxter. Councillor David Ellamy.
Yeah, just to expand on what Councillor Baxter said, what we should do is make the finished document a controlled document, so that if there is any changes made, we record why it was changed, when it was changed, and give the new version or that particular page a reference number so that everybody knows that they've got the most up-to-date version of it. A bit like you do with ISOs and stuff like that.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I think that's a very good suggestion, and picking up on the point that Councillor Baxter made. I think when we're discussing this, I use the example of a shop in your ward that they may be selling alcohol, for instance, as a license. That there may be contravening it, and actions taken, and the ward member doesn't know, but yeah, everybody locally knows that's the issue. And I do think it's important that, obviously, I agree with Councillor Baxter. We don't want to know every time a road sweeper comes into our ward, but stuff around things like void properties and if enforcement actions been taken against a shop or premises in our wards, I think it would be useful for us to be involved, because potentially there could be some fallout from it. And again, it potentially embarrasses us not knowing that something's happening of that magnitude in our ward. Councillor Ray Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Regarding what Councillor Baxter said and Councillor Breeder Griffin said, 15 years ago, we used to have the Arch file, and we used to take out pages as they were replaced, new pages in there. It was stopped only due to cost, and that was the only reason why. I thought it was a much better system than we got now. Thank you.
I think you made a very good point there, Councillor Wootton, and I heard that actually Councillor Baxter's comment was it can't be cheap producing this, and it can't. So I'm pretty sure actually having a lever arch approach where we can just replace the specific page is probably a more cost-effective way of doing this. It'd be interesting, Graham, if you could just sort of speak with speak with people, because at some point when we do get a final document, we do want it to go out to members. So, there may be some members who are quite happy receiving an electronic copy, and that's fine. And if they want to, that's okay. But I think if members do want a hard copy, they should be given the opportunity of one. And I think the approach that seems to be the general consensus from Councillor Griffin, Councillor Baxter and Councillor Wootton, and I know that also the Councillor Selby's raised this with me as well, I think potentially is the way forward. Thank you. Councillor Dilks, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I was going to leave my comments to the end, but it's just that point about when somebody said, oh, how do we know they've got the most up-to-date version and all that? The most up-to-date version is going to be online. It's going to be the online version, hopefully, and I do accept what you're saying, that certain councillors may want a hard copy. At county, they've virtually stopped issuing those, and you're told it's online. Get it online, which is fine. So, you know, I don't think every councillor, we should not automatically produce a copy for every councillor. It may be the hard copies that are produced, and I accept perhaps group leaders, or you want one or two within each group, maybe that would be useful, one way of looking at it. You don't have to also produce it as an A4 lever arch file. It could be A5. Yeah, exactly. I do remember, perhaps Ray is thinking the same when I am. I think the Constitution used to be an A5 lever arch, and you didn't need to be carrying around this huge, great lump with you. Can I just sort of add, I was going to say, you know, just to echo what colleagues have said, I do welcome the process that you're going through right now. I know it's an enormous job that you, the committee, are doing, and the officers supporting it. You know, there is clearly sort of buy-in, if I can call it that, across the council chamber. I really welcome that, and I hope when it comes to adoption, and I think it's down for the AGM in May, that, you know, we will not have a row about it, that there'll be a consensus right across the council chamber for what you're doing. So thank you for what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dilks. I mean, I echo those comments. I think, sorry, before I go rabbiting on, Councillor Linda Wotton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite interesting to listen to your conversations, and it proves we've learned lessons from past experiences, and I'm enjoying listening to you all. And Phil, Ashley, and all of you have made very valued points this morning. But going back to everyone having their own copy of the Constitution, we discussed from the very beginning that we didn't think this was necessary, and it was interesting to hear what Phil said. I mean, the best version will be online because it will be constantly updated as and when things change. But there's no reason why there can't be a copy in the members' room or the leader's office, opposition leader's office, etc., etc. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wotton. Councillor Paul Fellows has.
Yeah, it's almost apologetic to take the time up, but I think what was said by Linda is absolutely correct. We should be moving towards an electronically centralised copy of the Constitution. We can then have other methods that members can access if they need, like Linda said, a copy centralised here. You could do a flash drive of it. But I think as a point of principle, we need to move towards a centralised form for a whole pile of mitigated reasons that people have pointed out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fellows. Councillor Phil Dilks wants to come back.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to come back. It was just picking up what Linda said, and I know Linda did, and her previous committee did an awful lot of work, you know, building up to where we are now. But having said what I've said about, you know, us all being issued with, you know, lumps of paper, there's nothing, you know, and I'm sure it would be welcome to look at the possibility of a small aid memoir to the Constitution that tells you where to look up the particular paragraph that you're looking for, and also has perhaps the rules of debate and other very essential things that, you know, we're all sort of looking up frequently. Do you know what I mean? I know that's how long is a piece of string and how long do you make it, but an aid memoir might be worth considering. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dilks. I'm picking up from different comments that people are making, actually, that I think this may need a slightly longer discussion than we've probably got time for this morning. So I'm just wondering, I just finished, Councillor Baxter, I'll come to you. I'm just thinking maybe, Graham, perhaps we could add this on as a specific agenda item, possibly at our next meeting, to kind of discuss how we think, once we've agreed the Constitution, the format in which it should be available to members. Councillor Baxter.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. We're not here today to discuss that. We're obviously interested in the format of the document, but we're not here to discuss the format. We're just here to discuss the content. And so we don't need to worry about whether it's hardback, paperback, available in Waterstones or just available as an ebook. It doesn't matter today. But yes, before we go crazy on it. I mean, at the end of the day, I can find the stuff I need to about the Constitution on the internet if I've got the time and energy to do it. If I can't do it like that, I could just print it off anyway. You can print off all of the internet if you've got enough paper. I don't recommend it. But today, we're talking about the content, not the format.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Baxter. I think we can, if we can add that on as an agenda item, Graham, going forward, because and it may be as well. This is something we may want to seek the views of all the of all councils on, because obviously I think that might be useful as part of the consultation process. Our next stage of our consultation process that we discuss the format with all councillors to sort of give their feedback on it. I think that would be quite useful. Thank you. Councillor Griffin.
Could you, if you're wanting to find that information, could you do it as a questionnaire? So it would be quite quick. Then we're highlighting the things that we want to know about and just do it as a quick questionnaire to go around to people. But I like the idea that of being able to read it with it centralised, because you can do a quick speed read with it like that.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking at Graham. Have we got the ability to kind of do a survey monkey or whatever it's called? Thank you. Right. I'm probably going to sort of just say now, I don't think we progress this first anymore. Are we all happy with the first recommendation? I mean, I don't think there's probably any need to vote on this because we're only noting it, but if we just have a show of hands, I'm proposing that we accept the first recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ashley Baxter. If we can all vote on whether or not we're happy now to accept the first recommendation. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So now if we can move on to the second recommendation, which is really to sort of look at the new schedule, part 3, the new responsibility for functions. If Graham can just quickly run through the processes taken just to update on that. Thank you.
So members will know of the 3 documents that we have that have basically been a way of ensuring that everything's mapped. There's explanations as to why things have been removed, why things have been amended, and what those amendments are, and additions as well. So part 3, responsibility for functions document, is Appendix A, and it's that document that council will be asked, subject to your recommendation today, asked to approve. Appendix B is the mapping document, which effectively sets out those parts of the existing constitution that have been lifted into the new part 3 document, those parts that have been deleted, and where we've put additions or amendments in place, they have been colour coded, and again the mapping document sets out where those changes have occurred. So hopefully it's easier to follow than previous examples, even though it probably does look a bit complicated when you have the documents in front of you. The third document is the actual constitution itself, and what I've done is I've actually included the whole document, because with the scheme of delegation, the challenge in the existing constitution is that there are various parts of delegations all over the document, and you'll see from the different parts that are colour coded in the working document just how difficult it's been in terms of collating them all into one single document itself. So they're the 3 documents. Now, one of the questions I had, subject to the committee being happy with the part 3 document, when we submit this to council, would the committee just like to submit the part 3 document as a clean version with no colour on it, so that is the document that council's being asked to consider, and then perhaps have the working documents as background documents that you can view online if you wish to? Or would you prefer council to have the whole pack like you've got today in terms of all of the the documents before you, bearing in mind that members have all had copies of these electronically already ahead of all the workshop sessions that were held. But if members want to go through the document and make any changes to it, this is the kind of last opportunity for the committee before taking it to council. So I'm in your hands, Chairman, as to how you want to proceed.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Graham. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to go first, but I don't think we need to send all this paperwork to all councillors before full council. I mean, if we're arguing about the format of the resultant agreed constitution and whether or not we need it on paper, then we certainly don't need all this. We do. We're important. We're the constitution paper. But no. And I mean, I think I can't see an easy way to boil this down unless you were to say that the information is electronically available on the agenda website, but hasn't been sent out for the purpose. Because I think legally, when you send out the summons to the meeting, you only need to send out the first page or the front bit of the agenda. You don't need to send all the documents behind it. Certainly that's true at parish and probably is true at SK level as well. However, everyone's been invited to the workshops. 19 of us, which I think is quite a respectable engagement rate, have participated. So everyone has had a chance to go on. And yeah, the less paper within the full agenda pack, the better, as long as we properly explain what has gone on. Having said that, you said this is our last chance. I would, if I dare, amend the recommendation, which is on page, I don't know which page it's on. 11, on page 11. Is there a way to say, in the unlikely event that between the 7 of us plus umpteen officers, we have missed typographical and formatting errors, that can be delegated to the chair and the head of democratic services? Because I'm sure that if I looked hard enough, I could find a full stop or a comma. Obviously, don't go putting in changes to the role of a chairman behind our backs, but in terms of minor typographical and formatting errors, I would be happy for that to change between now and full council. But the rest of it, I feel like I've had my say, and very welcome the progress.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Baxter. Yeah, I think that's a very, very valuable point. I'd be happy to accept that as an amendment to that particular recommendation if you wanted to propose that, Councillor Baxter, and I'd be happy to second that. But I think Alan Robinson wants to come in to give us the view of the monitoring officer. Thank you.
It was really about whether it was possible not to attach all the documents legally, and it clearly is. These can be background papers that you can put a link on on the electronic version of the papers that we send out. The background papers that we'll refer to. You're right. If we send out, we've got a climate change emergency announced here in South Kesteven, and to be sending out hundreds and hundreds of pages to 50 odd members just doesn't make any sense, does it? So I'd be certainly endorsing the prospect of putting it down as background papers that are available electronically. And if people want to go onto those background papers and print them for their own personal use, that's up to them. But I think it would be unwise for us to do so, let alone the postage cost or the amount of money to get such a big document out to all 50 odd people. And we're going to expect everybody to read through a pack that is 500-600 pages long. I think it seems really unlikely to me. We need to be pointing them to the important stuff.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. I think I agree with that. I know Graham asked a question in terms of the format to go out, in terms of do we want the colour coding that we've got to be on those documents that are sent out. I wonder if members have got any specific views around that. I mean, I think the colour coding is useful, but again, the last thing you want to do is to sort of give members of an overload of information. Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, I think I would support a completely clean copy without the colour coding, but obviously we could, in the background papers that go out, mention the fact that these things have happened. They could be there in the background papers. So if a member wanted to find a particular point that interested them and see how it was changed, they could. But I do feel that if we don't send out an absolutely clean version, all we are inviting, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, is a deeper review of it or questions that we've already answered. And I feel that if colleagues are shown where that information is, but we present what we consider to be the best point at which we're at in a clean form, I actually think that's the best way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. Have any members got any other comments on that specific point? Councillor Griffin.
I'm not sure if I'm specific, but anyway, could we put our questionnaire in amongst all that as well, so that we've got the information and we've got the questionnaire at the same time, and you can fill it in or send it in?
Not for me to say, but I don't think that makes sense to go into the agenda pack for full council, but in the same envelope, that may well do. Although, as Councillor Whittington's stated, that an online Survey Monkey thing is probably more likely to get a response because you don't have to fill it in. I heard about.
Would happen that they would do it electronically rather than lots and lots of papers.
I think, are you suggesting, Councillor Griffin, that we do the electronic Survey Monkey, but as part of the background papers, we just give a front page of what questions were asked, so that for information purposes, members know that this electronic questionnaire took place and this is the front sheet of the questions that were asked? Because that might, again, just be part of the background papers, which.
Sorry, Chair. I don't know if you or Councillor Griffin can clarify. When you talk about the questionnaire, are we talking about the questionnaire about the format of the final document? Okay. So that's a separate exercise to sending this to full council. We can send this to full council regardless. We can have a questionnaire about the format regardless. But for me, it would be helpful if they were on two different emails and/or two different sheets of paper.
Thank you, Councillor. If I might make a suggestion, in terms of the format, this is probably something that we're going to be looking at post 27th of January. It might just be worth, Graham, if in the report to council, you put a section in to say the members will be receiving an electronic Survey Monkey questionnaire regarding the format, and then members are aware that this will be coming out to them at some point after the 27th of January. I think that might actually solve this. Is it people who tend to? I'm getting nods of heads around from people. Councillor Raywatton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think just for council, the paper and reference to the minutes of the meeting need to be made. Not that, because otherwise you're inviting people to comment, and we're going to have a long process of going through council again.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Thank you. Okay, so anybody else want to talk in terms of the proposed document for full council? As I said, Councillor Baxter's put forward an amendment to the proposal that Lucy, I think it's subject to any typographical errors being identified between now and the date of publication of the council papers. So if Councillor Baxter's proposed that, I'm happy to second that. I'm going to put that to the vote now. Are we all happy that this part 3 document goes to full council with our approval for recommendation, subject to that amendment, that any typographical errors that are found between now and publication date are corrected? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Now we're going to go on to agreeing the process for the next stage of the constitution review. So I'm guessing now that obviously, because I feel that whatever we agree today should go in the paper that goes to council on the 27th of January, so we can put forward a recommendation for the next stage of the process. and that will be reviewing all of the rules of procedure. But I'll just let Graham introduce that.
Yeah, so paragraph 1.1 sets out the new parts of the constitution that council agreed to last year. So responsibility for functions is the main section that has taken the time because it's the most complicated. The summary and explanation in articles of the constitution parts 1 and 2 I think will be relatively simple in terms of literally copying and pasting existing information from the current constitution to the new version. What I propose to do though is use the same mapping system and then the same colour coding system to ensure that you're all satisfied that we've covered everything and that if something has been deleted or amended, that there's a reason why, and so that's clear to you. Again, with rules of procedure and codes and protocols, I don't envisage there being that much that we need to tweak. I think the main thing that will happen as part of this review, just from what Councillor Baxter said earlier about this is more an administrative process in terms of tidying it up. There are going to be areas where there are duplications. We already know in our experience of advice being sought of us that it is sometimes difficult because there are contradictions in this document. So there may be things that we do have to change because otherwise it's not going to make sense. So again, those will be documented and mapped so that it's clear, and we'll give an explanation as to what any deletions we're recommending, the reason why they're being deleted. For example, election of chairman of governance and audit committee. I think there's 3 references to how that person could be elected at council in the current constitution, which is why there was a bit of a conversation at full council as to what process we needed to follow. That's a perfect example as to some of the issues that we've got in the document where they need to be ironed out. So, so that's the kind of stuff that we'll be doing as we go through. So, what I'm proposing to do, I mean, obviously, the code of conduct we've already dealt with. The members' allowances scheme, that's as it is in the constitution already. There'll be a separate review of that by our independent remuneration panel, but again, that's going to be a relatively easy part of the constitution to review. So it's more the rules of procedure and codes and protocols that we'll be focusing on, and I propose to do those at the same time, but dealing with them separately. So the same engagement will take place, the same opportunities for members to participate will take place, but I won't be dealing with it in one big chunk. It will again, like this has been, be in separate parts. So there'll be sessions on rules of procedure, sessions on codes of protocols sections. But what I'll do is set out a timeline for that, because the aim is to get a full version of the constitution before council at the AGM, so that we start the new council year with a new constitution that we can all follow and understand, and and that's the plan. This part 3 is going to the January meeting of council, so the 27th of January. So that once that's approved, it will set us up to follow the same process for the existing parts that are outstanding, with the aim of getting it before council in May.
That's great. Thank you very much, Graham. I'll just make a couple of comments first before I move up to members. I think because obviously I think, as Graham has made it, around the rules of procedure, potentially there are issues now where we do have potential conflicts, or constitution is not clear, and I know that it has resulted in some debates, especially at full council meetings. I'm thinking this potentially could be the slightly more controversial part of agreeing, if you like, what the actual interpretation of it is. So that this may be an area that will need specific debate between the administration group and the opposition groups, just so we're all happy, that everybody's happy with the interpretation that's finally agreed on, and ultimately we may have to rely upon officers. I'm looking at Alan as the monitoring officer around this, just because I often sometimes think with rules that it's the grey areas of interpretation that potentially could cause issues, and so I think it's really important that I think that maybe, Graham, that we potentially look at these early on in the next stage of the process, so give us plenty of time to to actually address them. And in terms of the codes and protocols, obviously we've looked at the members' code of conduct, which has gone through. The two next big, the two big ones there are the financial management rules and the contract procurement rules. And I'm getting, I had a quick look through the financial management rules over the weekend, and there's nothing in there that I'm speaking as an accountant. There's nothing in there that I wouldn't expect to see, but. And again, I know that obviously the finance team do prepare those, and also the contract procurement rules. But I think it's important that what is that me as an accountant may go is, oh, that's what I expect to see in there. That some of the members may think, actually, why is that in there? I imagine the council. I know Councillor Baxter's looking at me, and I think that is important because. It's important that if there are any contentious issues around those that are in there, that the officers who say, well, this is what I have to do, it's the explanation process, which I think is really crucial behind. So those are my sort of introductory comments. Now I'm going to open it up to members of the committee to discuss the next stage of the process. Councillor David Bellamy.
Just going back to what Councillor Griffin said about the rules and procedures of council and stuff like that, how will we deal with the variations between the different committees? Because potentially, you know, they're all slightly different, aren't they? Would that be a part of it, or is it just the main? Are we just talking about council itself?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're looking at all the committees, not just the council. I mean, I think it'd be great if we could get some uniformity. I'm just wondering if Graham or Alan have got a view on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, so all of the committees have their own terms of reference. So they are in the current constitution at the moment, and that will form part of the new sections in the revised document. So they will all be kind of looked at. So it's an opportunity to just double check that our terms of reference for our committees are still relevant and reflect what their responsibilities are. So again, that may be an area that's relatively contentious if things are out of date, but that will form part of that next process.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Bellamy again.
The only thing I was going to suggest is that it goes on the agendas of the relevant committees just to discuss. Bearing in mind we've got a deadline to stick to, haven't we, if we're going for May, so that that can be discussed at that particular committee meeting and then feedback.
Thank you much indeed, Councillor Bellamy. I think that's a good idea because in effect that's what we allowed the planning committee to do. Regarding the planning services review, I mean, an awful lot of that is reflected in the current responsive for functions document 3, because the planning committee has had a chance to sort of look at what it does. Just looking at Alan Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just thinking what Councillor Bellamy said, I think there is a real opportunity here to get those the way we debate, the rules of debate, more consistent than they currently are, and only to have differences specifically brought out where they're really necessary for the business of that committee. They should be, that it looks like they've been written in isolation at the moment. And I think they're aiming for that consistency would certainly make life a lot easier for members and officers, unless there is a very good reason for you to veer away from that. So if there's something specific in legislation around development management or planning or something like that where there needs to be a difference, other than that, I'd be kind of minded to try and get them to be as consistent as they possibly can be for ease for both members and officers and the public watching, to understand why it works one way in planning and not like that in licensing, or why it works one way in full council and not like that somewhere else. I think the more consistent we can be, the better. And we should be shooting for that.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. I'd agree with that. I know potentially at the moment there have been some issues around terms of reference, and I know it's an issue that has been discussed at the Governance and Audit Committee in the past about when we've been looking at reports, And Peter raised the point, oh, well, should this be discussed by a different committee? Certainly in terms of the Governance Audit Committee, the Governance Audit Committee should just be looking at a process and whether the process has been followed. So if we get a report into, for instance, an example we had recently of Section 106 monies, the Governance Audit Committee in effect look at the process behind it and if there's been a failure of process. But then in terms of the information, that should then go to the relevant committee. And I think potentially there are areas, certainly I think of issues sometimes that the finance, the FedCo look at that potentially do affect other committees. But finance view should be looking at the finance element of it, not the performance, if you know what I mean. So I think we need to identify the sort of performance and management type of issues need to go to the respective committee. But anything that it's been an audit report into the process, that is going to an audit. And I think it is just trying to understand the difference in thinking in terms of what the committees do. The audit committee, if you like, is the watchdog to sort of spot where there's been failures in process, to then sort of monitor how those failures are being addressed. It doesn't affect the role of the respective committee. So I hope that I think members would agree with that approach. Thanks. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. As a general rule with this, my goal would be to increase the amount of power that the full council has and that individual councillors have over the affairs of the council. As a general principle, we want to give people more opportunity, and that applies to members of the public as well. So members of the public should have more opportunity and more understanding of how the council worked in order that they can engage and not say that we're a clique or a closed shop or whatever else. So with that as a principle, I think I'd like some clarity over, I think Mr. Watts said that we were going to do rules of procedure next, or did he say that we're doing rules of procedure and codes and protocols next? I think it kind of makes, we need to keep those two separately, because as you say, the financial codes and so on can be complicated. I'm not an accountant, but I have an interest in the fact. Yeah. But once if I try and get my head around the financial management rules at the same time as worrying about whether my power is being enhanced or diminished as a result of changes to the main constitution, I might get overload. So those, whether or not they are separated sequentially or separated just as different items, I don't know, but they do need to be separated. And so concentrating on rules of procedure first, there'll be some things which are non-contentious. And I thought when we first started, we were only going to readjust the order of what's in there. We weren't going to change any of the rules. We weren't going to, so for example, increase or decrease the amount of minutes that people can speak, or the number of motions that people can submit to each council. We weren't going to change any rules. We were just going to put them into a logical order. And that, for me, shouldn't be contentious at all. Except that, as I think Mr. Robinson pointed out, there are some bits where there is tension between different bits. So for the election of a chair, you might expect that the election of the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee, and I didn't realise we were going to do that again in the near future. Quite happy with the Governance and Audit Chair at the moment, Chair. But anyway, the election of a chair of a committee or a regulatory committee or a overview script, I would have thought that was fairly standard, and I think that might create a tension, and even more tension when people, including myself, might speak up and say, we don't like the way that chairs are appointed at the moment. Personally, I think that the leader has got far too much power of patronage over the chairs, and I think that the recent scrutiny review bears that out. And I think as a council, we should be looking at the way that chairs are elected. I don't know that it would come out with a different result, but in terms of the principle of a thing, if we're holding the executive to account, then I don't think the leader of the executive should be the person who's appointing the scrutiny chairs. That's an argument to be had, and I think it's a lot more contentious than whether or not we have bullet points or numbered letters. So it's a different thing. So there will be some contentious things which are thrown up by the process of tidying up. And then there'll be some contentious things that are just contentious anyway. So if we do want to add things to it, and so I would like to know whether or not as a committee we want to tackle the things that I think Councillor Sandal mentioned earlier on that need changing, and we might as well change them now rather than waiting for a better date, which would mean a lot more arguments and would need a clear way of saying these are the non-contentious things, get them done. These are the slightly things that need sorting, and then these are the whole. These are the ones where we need an argument, which is probably about the leader's power. That's probably where the biggest argument would be from my side. I mean, there are some things that probably wouldn't be contentious, like at the moment, members can propose motions to full council. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that if a motion is proposed, it should have a seconder at the point that it's submitted. I think we'd save an awful lot of time if, like, we could get rid of some potentially spurious motions if the process of getting someone to second the motion would add an element of common sense to it, and you might still get the motion, but it wouldn't be as sometimes the motions that we get are quite complicated and wordy and are 2 pages when they could be 1 line, and so the process of having to talk to at least one other person about it would improve that. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think you raised some very, very good points. I mean, you know, I think we do know within the current constitution that there are parts of it where there's duplication, but the sort of the wording is slightly different. Now, I think it's these that we need to sort of look at first, just so we can run them by everybody to say, look, this is the duplication. There's 2 slightly potentially different meanings here, and I guess we kind of need to understand what the new meaning is going to be. Does that make sense? Because it is part of a cleaning up exercise, and I agree. Potentially, there are some elements that maybe are going to be slightly more contentious. As you say, it may need an argument. I don't think this is the time to be doing it. I think that if we do get a constitution in place by May, if as part, I certainly know with the planning services review that they decided that 6 months after the planning review recommendations went public, there'd kind of be a feedback element to it just to see how it was working. So it may be that that's part of our thinking. Do we put a document in May that may not look at some of the really contentious stuff, but maybe then 6 months' time during next year that potentially we go back and review those, because then at least we've got a really good starting base. You know what I mean? Because at the moment, I sometimes think that the part of the problem we have is that potentially we are discussing some quite contentious stuff, and we haven't quite got a sound foundation. So I think if we get the foundation right, potentially we can then maybe look at some of these issues later on when we got a firmer foundation, and if one member's views are on that.
If I might have first go, I agree, and I think what you're saying is we should concentrate on the easy, uncontentious bits and do that, and then later on worry about whether or not the leader's got too much power or not enough. That's fine, and I endorse that. I wholly agree that let's do the easy bits first.
Thank you, Gary. I think potentially there may be a few bits around rules of procedure where there are duplications, whereas you say it might be your second category where it's mildly contentious or just needs a view. And on that, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to add that that's where the engagement sessions are really, really useful, because they will bring out some of these things that that don't necessarily feel right or look right in the new format. And it might be that actually there's agreement to change something because in the new format and the way it's reworded, it doesn't make sense as it currently stands. So there's still that kind of opportunity to amend things, but I think the principle is that we're trying to make this document as clear and understandable as possible in terms of its format and how it reads. So I think there's opportunities to make tweaks, but those engagement sessions will be really key in kind of bringing those out, because it may be that there's agreement across the board in relation to a certain thing that we can change quite easily. So yeah, I just wanted to add that really.
Thanks, Graham. I think just before I call Councillor Griffin in, I think as part of that, it might be also interesting as part of when we do the engagement process, especially for the engagement for all members, that we do encourage members if they think something isn't quite working, that they want a bit more clarification around, they actually have the opportunity to feed into the process to say, I'm not, can you just explain this? Councillor Griffin.
What I was going to say was that sometimes we have to think about the makeup of the committee, because it might be that somebody's left this committee to go to somewhere else, and then you've got somebody new coming in. So there are other issues as well to take note of.
Yes, I think that's a very important point. I know that for certain committees, such as planning and licensing and audit, there has to be an element of mandatory training involved. But I also think it would be useful, especially when we get new members who may join during a council term, that if they are sort of joining an established committee or transferring, that there is some kind of handover process. It can be informal. It can just be a teams meeting with the chair and vice chair and the democratic services, and just to sort of run through what the committee does, so members can be filled in with some of the background. But I think that's something that we can sort of take place outside the constitution. But I think it would be really useful, because my view is the more training we have, the more focused training we have, the better. Graham, do you want to? Okay, in terms of the process, I think there's a lot to be said from what Councillor Baxter said in terms of perhaps splitting four and five out. I'd be interested. I think we need to move with 4 rules of procedure first, because I think potentially this is where we may have some slightly these mildly contentious issues or things that need some clarification around, because I'm guessing that the financial procedure rules and the contract procedure rules are probably going to require a lot of officer input into that. Graham.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The financial procedure rules and contract procedure rules are already in the process of being reviewed by officers. They are reviewed regularly anyway, so they're probably the best parts of our current constitution in terms of being up to date and fit for purpose. So yeah, they will still come before council. As I think there are, certainly with contract procedure rules, there are certain amendments that are required as a result of changes in legislation and that kind of thing. So they will still come before you. It's definitely my intention to keep things separate, because it will get a bit overbearing to try and join some of these sections together. So I might be working on them at the same time, but I will present them to members and undertake the engagement sessions on those parts separately, so that you're focusing on rules of procedure or you're focusing on codes and protocols, so that they're not kind of intertwined at all. So they will be separate for you, but they may, because of the time scale and trying to get these done by May, I'm just keen that we progress with them. So behind the scenes, I'll be working on them all, but I'll bring them to you in a logical order separately.
Thanks, Graham. In terms of the financial procedure rules, do they normally, are they considered by FEDCO as part of their work programme?
I don't know, Chairman, but I can certainly find out.
Yes, thanks, Graham. And also in terms of the contract procedure rules, I'm guessing again, does that go to either FEDCO or to Audit Committee? Because I'm just thinking that it might be that if they do go to either FEDCO or Audit, there would be, before they go to council in May, there would be the opportunity for members of FEDCO and audit to look at them. I also agree they should come back to the next, to a meeting here of the Constitution Committee at some point. But it might be useful if both FEDCO and audit could perhaps have a look at them, whichever one we think is the right committee for them to go to as well, as part of that process. Councillor Baxter, you want to come?
I was just going to say that you could perhaps have a chat with the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee or the vice chair of the Finance Committee and see if he's amenable to putting it on their agenda. I think that you might be right. I think that some of it might go to, I think more likely the Governance and Audit Committee, but perhaps there's an officer that knows what's going on.
Thanks, Councillor Baxter. I do seem to have a lot of hats at the moment. Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. So as Graham said, we'll look into that and work out exactly where that needs to go, where it's gone in the past. I was actually just distracted because I was trying to find out, but I can't see it just at the moment. But it makes sense, as you suggest, if there's a need for them to go through that process, for those to get them first and then as they flow through. I guess from Graham and I's point of view, that's not the difficult bit, is it? Because we'll be expecting Richard and his team to do the heavy lifting on that part, and we'll be going, here it is. Whereas the other parts are kind of more in our area of work that we'll need to focus on. So that's probably the bit why Graham thinks he can do both together, is because he won't be doing one of them in the main.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, because I think my thinking behind that is that in many respects we allow the planning committee the focus and the time to go through the planning services review. And I actually watched that process through. I watched the recording of the first meeting and then the second meeting. I actually thought that was a really good way in how sort of consultation worked around, something that was quite a contentious initial document when it came out. So I'm just thinking that of perhaps allowing whichever committee it is, but it's FEDCO or audit. I suspect it could very well be audit. The opportunity to kind of have the same sort of input as the planning committee did into the planning services review. So thanks on that. My final question that I was going to raise is, obviously, it's already been mentioned by Councillor Baxter, the scrutiny review, and how the scrutiny. Now, I'm potentially just aware of the fact that at some point, I'm not quite sure where we are with the screening review and the recommendations there, because again, they potentially might have an impact upon the present constitution, but I wouldn't want it to, again, sort of, I'm not sure where we are, and I don't need to kind of undermine what we're doing. So some sort of input on where we are with the screening review would be quite useful. Thank you. Alan Robinson.
So obviously we've now had all the findings from the scrutiny review. I think we're just finalising this week the opportunity for all members who weren't able to engage with the workshops to have those. And then what we're really trying to do is to put, we've got a number of reviews that have taken place over the last year or so, and to pull out all those key themes that come out of all the reviews that we've had and come up with a plan for dealing with all of those together. And of course, some of the findings may need constitutional change. And I think, but that'll be something that will need to be agreed separately and then built into the constitutional kind of, built into the kind of constitution at a later date once that's done. And I think that's probably one of your contentious ones on Councillor Baxter's list that we look at once we've got the kind of cleared the decks and we know exactly, we all understand what the constitution currently looks like. So that would be my plan, Chairman. And of course, it could potentially be a contentious area if we were to change the terms of reference or even consider not having the same number or type of scrutiny committees that we currently do. I wouldn't want that to kind of get in the way of us getting a nice, clean, understandable constitution that we all know how to work within. So that will be my suggestion, is that that's almost that kind of work plan going forward as to the things we're going to deal with by, over the coming year in the Constitution Committee, which would certainly, would any consider the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee, Scrutiny Review would be a really useful, but something, as you know from the planning stuff, something that we need to put a lot of work into over a reasonable period of time.
Thanks, Alan, for that. I'm kind of taking from that we should look at the screening review post May, because I'm putting it in that list of contentious stuff that we need to address on the basis of a firm foundation. I think that potentially would give officers and senior councillors an opportunity to look at that. I think it's, are the committee sort of happy with that? Because I think that makes a lot of sense to me, that forms part of our post-May work programme. Any views on that? Everybody seems fairly happy with that on that one. Okay. Before we take a final vote on this, I'm guessing that Graham, if you can go away and prepare a draft timetable around the consultation process around 4 and 5. I'd kind of like it. I know it's putting pressure on you because they're going to report out to full council. Some way that we could just circulate this around the committee before it goes out as the pods, just so all members of the committee have had a sight of the proposed timetable and what the consultation looks like, so that we're all aware of it before other councils receive it. Because I think that'd be quite useful. Right. So, recommendation 3 is that we agree the process for the next stage of the Constitution Review. I think. I mean, are we all happy that it follows a similar sort of consultation process? I'm talking about there will be individual meetings, very similar to all of the people identified in paragraph 2.3. And again, that there are workshops to which all members will be invited. Because I think that's been a really, really positive part of this whole process. Because I very much want to involve as many people in this process as I can, because I think that consensus approach is the best way forward. So would we all be happy to agree to that as the process going forward? Can I have a proposer for that? Councillor Ray Wootton, and seconded Councillor Sue Sandal. Are we all happy to, so all those in favour of that, please indicate. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Right. Okay, that just leaves us on to agenda item 6, is any other business, Mr. Chairman, by reasons of special circumstances decided is urgent. I've not got anything. I think we've sort of discussed potentially a view, a way forward on the scrutiny review, which is always that thing that's sort of hanging there around the whole process. So on that basis, it's dead on 12 o'clock noon. So declare the meeting. Cancelled. I declare the meeting concluded. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.